Hello there, today we're going to be talking about two Spanish verbs, ser and estar, both of which in English mean to be, as you may have guessed from the little epithet at the bottom there. So these two verbs both mean the same thing in English, and it's really important that we learn the difference between the two of them, because they're both used in different contexts to mean very different things. So first of all, let's have a look quickly at the difference essentially between the two verbs and their uses. So effectively, ser is used for an essential characteristic of something, and estar is used for a condition. Don't worry if you don't understand this at the moment, because we'll go through it in some more detail in just a second. But first of all, what we need to do is have a look at the conjugations here below. So in English we have all of the conjugations here for the English word to be. I am, you are, he is, she is, we are, and the plural form you are, they are. So here in ser, which is an irregular verb, which means that we need to make sure that we memorize all of them because they don't follow any strict pattern or regular pattern that we can use to extrapolate what these conjugations are. So in the verb ser in Spanish, we have yo soy, tú eres, él o ella es, nosotros somos, vosotros sois, ellos o ellas son, which all correspond to these conjugations over here in the English. I, you, he, we, you plural, and they are. And then we have estar over here, which is again an irregular verb, which means that we have to memorize all of these conjugations. So we have yo estoy, tú estás, él o ella está, nosotros estamos, vosotros estáis, y ellos o ellas están, which again correspond to these over here. So moving on now to the characteristics and the differences between the use of these two verbs. Again, the main difference between the two is that ser describes a characteristic, whereas estar describes a condition. What that essentially means is that ser is describing what something is in its essence, and estar is used to describe how something is in terms of its position, or in terms of any sort of changing, transient, or temporary characteristic or trait or condition that an object might have. On the flip side of that, ser is used to describe permanent, unchanging, and fixed characteristics of something, so the essence of an object or a person. What we have here then is a quick exercise to categorize the following adjectives as to whether they're used with ser o estar. So, ¿cuáles adjetivos van con ser y cuáles adjetivos van con estar? So, alto, here we have alto, which means, of course, tall. With alto, we would use ser because it's a permanent characteristic that somebody has that doesn't change over time. Secondly, we have necesario, which of course means necessary. And necessary, again, would use ser because it's describing an essential characteristic of something. Moving on, we have contento or contenta in the feminine. Again, here with alto, we have alta and necesaria for the feminine forms. Contento would be used with estar because it is describing a temporary state of somebody in that they're happy. Estoy contento means I'm happy, and it's something that changes over time. We're not always going to be happy, and therefore it's estar rather than ser. Cansado, again, cansado meaning tired. Again, we can use the feminine form of cansado with a, cansada. This, again, would use estar, because it's a temporary characteristic. Estoy cansado, estoy cansada. And finally, triste, again, would use estar, because it's a temporary characteristic. Triste, of course, means sad. Estoy triste, I'm sad. I'm not always going to be sad. It's a temporary, transient emotion, and therefore we use estar rather than ser. Here below we have two adjectives, delgado y gordo. Delgado meaning skinny or thin, and gordo meaning fat. These two are changing characteristics. They can change over time, but something that's special about these two is that they can be used with either ser or estar, because of the fact that if we use it with ser, then it's something that is considered more permanent. Soy delgado, soy gordo. It's something that doesn't change over time. I might be describing myself or somebody else who has always been thin or has always been fat, and it's not considered something that's changing over time. Estar, on the other hand, if we use these adjectives with estar, it's considered something that's less permanent and more transient. So if I'm feeling particularly fat one day and I've eaten a lot of food, I'd say estoy gordo rather than soy gordo, because it's something that I'm feeling temporarily and that may change over time. I'm not saying that soy gordo, I've always been fat. I'm saying I am at the moment. Estoy gordo porque no hago mucho deporte de momento. I'm fat because I'm not doing a lot of sport at the moment. So, in terms of other adjectives that can be used with both ser and estar, we have adjectives that can change in meaning when they're used with either or verb, which is something important to keep in mind. An adjective like listo, when it's used with soy or ser, is, here, from the verb ser, has a different meaning compared to estar, está, here. So we have el estudiante es listo, which means the student is smart, which when compared to el estudiante está listo means the student is ready. So we have a core difference there in meaning between the two uses of listo here. And this is just one example of how adjectives can change in meaning depending on whether they're used with ser or estar. And these are things that we need to commit to memory, because there aren't any rules or patterns to know the difference between which adjectives will change their meaning depending on whether they're used with ser or estar. Listo is a good one because it means smart, in essence, and ready. So we have el estudiante es listo, is smart. That's an essential characteristic. It's a character trait, which is why we use ser, versus el estudiante está listo, so meaning the student is ready. It's a temporary state. They're ready at the moment. Here we have some more examples of all of the different adjectives that change their meaning depending on whether they're used with ser or estar. So here we have ser despierto, soy despierto, which means soy listo, versus estar despierto, which means I'm up. I'm getting up in the morning. Me estoy despertando. So just for a quick recap, we have two verbs in Spanish for to be. ser y estar. Both of these are irregular, and they have to be memorized in terms of their conjugations. Secondly, different adjectives use either ser or estar, which depends on whether they're describing an essential trait or a characteristic, or a temporary condition. And then we have some adjectives which use both ser and estar, which can change the meaning in terms of their duration. Gordo and callado. So estoy gordo versus soy gordo. I am now versus I have always been. Or we have that third type, which gives the adjective an entirely new meaning altogether, which we've just discussed. Keep it.